Friday to everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Claudio Curry, former president of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce of Florida and current chairperson of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce Membership Committee. By the way, the best committee if you're a member and you want to participate. On behalf of the board of directors, it is my pleasure to welcome our speaker, Luciano Frois, co-president of One World Services, and our moderator, George Zakzak, founder and CEO of Yellow Flag. We extend our thanks to our partners who always support us, Ashe USA newspaper and Hyatt Reed. In my name, I extend a warm welcome to our new members. For those of you participating for the first time, we encourage you to join the BACCF, the largest binational chamber of commerce of the Americas in Florida. Please contact our staff, our office, to schedule a meeting. Mary, that reminds me, we also need to send a date for our next open mic. This event allows our members to network and present their companies to other members. Join us in April. Our speaker today is Luciano Frois, co-president of One World Services, a proprietary trading firm that provides best-in-class liquidity and market-making services to institutional clients and exchange in digital assets industry. Before entering this disruptive market, Luciano worked over 20 years at Embraer, one of our founding members, a global player in aerospace and defense sector. Throughout his career with Embraer, Luciano held several executive positions in the areas of finance, investor relations, and marketing, applying world-class best practices to business operations and strategy. Moderating today's conversation is George Zakzak, originally from São Paulo, Brazil. He holds an undergraduate degree in economics from Boston University and is an alumnus of Harvard Business School through its Owners President Management Program, OPM 33. He was the youngest ever graduate of the OPM program at the time. In 2009, Zakzak created BRI, a company that evolved into what it is today, Yellow Financial, an investment firm focused on the unattended non-prime mortgage sector. The company currently originates and manages over $100 million of high-cost mortgages. Zakzak has been an enthusiast of cryptocurrencies since 2016. His personal motto, which I like it, do what no one does, where people are afraid to go. Throughout this presentation, you are welcome to send your questions to Luciano, and he'll do his best to answer as many as possible. And if he cannot answer, we'll work with the team to send you a response via email. Thank you for participating, and the Q&A will be moderated by George. At this time, it's an immense pleasure to welcome Luciano Frois.
Thank you, Claudio, for the comments. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I would like to start off by thanking you, Claudio, for the invitation, thanking the board of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce of Florida for the opportunity, as well as you, Mary, for also helping us put this together. So with that being said, very excited to be here with you all to talk about a topic that I think has gained a lot of attention over the last few months. If we consider the meteoric rise of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies in this period. And so a very exciting, nascent and evolving industry, and a lot of curiosity around the topic. So I thought it was a great opportunity to talk a little bit more conceptually about the market and some of its key characteristics with you here today. So with that said, it's important to really think about the element that really makes cryptocurrencies possible, right? Which is blockchain technology. So without blockchain technology, Bitcoin or other major cryptocurrencies would not exist in the form that they do today. And if we think about what that means and the power of blockchain, I thought this was a pretty interesting quote from the former CEO of IBM. So I think she has a pretty good understanding of technology and the impacts when comparing what the internet did for communications is what blockchain will do for trusted transactions. So for those of us who were around in the late 80s, early 90s, and we remember a world without internet and where we are today, pretty dramatic shift, right? I mean, the internet really changed our lives in so many facets, and we wouldn't be able to be here right now communicating without the internet. So if we take that same analogy and try to apply it and imagine this in a world of trusted transactions, we can start to explore and capture the imagination of how disruptive this technology can be in the field of trusted transactions. So great, but what really is blockchain, right? So what does that really mean? So trying to explain it as simply as I can, blockchain is really nothing more than a collection of records. So think of information, data. In the case of Bitcoin, which we will discuss a little bit further, this data is a ledger of transactions. So debits and credits, very simply put, but it's a collection of data, can be other information, can be other records. These records are linked with each other through time since its origination. And every time that they are linked, that link becomes immutable part of the chain. And if anybody would think of changing any information that has already been added to the blockchain, they would need to change all of the chains in the blocks before that in order to do so. So very strongly resistant to alteration if we consider what I just described and how the information is put together. And on top of that, you have cryptography, which is the way that the information is stored. So if we look at Bitcoin, for example, it uses SHA-256 in terms of the cryptography language that resides for the Bitcoin blockchain. So all of the ledger, all of the information, the transactions that take place are encoded through cryptography. So with that mindset, honing in a little bit more on Bitcoin, how do the wheels turn, so to speak, in this technology and the day-to-day transactions that take place? You have miners that are independent third-party computing entities, companies that use their computing power to validate the blockchain, precisely everything we were just talking about. And so they do that by solving complex mathematical equations and validating the transactions through a consensus. In other words, a proof of work concept. And in doing so, they are rewarded with Bitcoin. And so they get paid, quote unquote, in Bitcoin for precisely providing this validation of the information and records in the blockchain. If you go back to 2010, 11, or 12, anybody really could download the Bitcoin software in their laptop or desktop and start mining and get Bitcoin as a result. So of course, today, there are companies with a very significant amount. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry now to mine Bitcoin. And so that brings more power to the infrastructure, to the network, more validation, more independent validators, which just makes for yet a more robust chain of validation of the transactions. And you have the users. Obviously, we'll talk a bit about the various types of users, but this can be anybody really who wants to either buy or sell or send Bitcoin. They're the users that will create the transactions in sending or receiving Bitcoin. So this is really blockchain with a with a little bit of levitation towards Bitcoin, but think of the concept can apply to other blockchains and other information, right? We'll talk a little bit about smart contracts and Ethereum, but keep that in mind when we think about the first bubble here of collection of records. As I mentioned, Bitcoin has a ledger in its blockchain, and that is the information that is stored in its blockchain. But you can have other kinds of information, such as even code or programming that results in other actions. So this is where smart contracts start to take place, but a little bit more to come on that. So understanding blockchain at a high level, let's talk about Bitcoin more specifically. So what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin, in its most basic definition, think of Bitcoin as a digital asset. So it's not in physical form. You can't hold a Bitcoin in your hand. It exists on the internet, in the digital world. But so it is a digital asset that resides in a decentralized blockchain. So it resides in that level of technology that enables it. These are some of the key characteristics of Bitcoin. So it originated back in 2009, just a little bit of backdrop, by a person or group of people who named themselves as Satoshi Nakamoto, again, or an individual. And it was as a result of the global financial crisis back in, again, 2008, 2009. We saw the monetary expansion challenges and everything that took place in that period of time. And as a result, this person or persons put out a white paper introducing Bitcoin, and they described the characteristics of a peer-to-peer network. So what were some of the key characteristics of Bitcoin? So it is deflationary. I think it's a very important aspect to mention, especially, again, if we look at the world today and all of the monetary expansion that is going on. I think if we look back just over the last 12 months, we've seen money printing of 25% more dollars in fluctuation in the system over the last 12 months than were ever in circulation. So a huge amount of monetary expansion going on in the world, and increase in supply of dollars and fiat currencies. So very interesting, especially around this time when you think about a deflationary asset. Well, why is that? Because Bitcoin, as it's designed, hard embedded in its code, it is limited to a total supply of 21 million Bitcoins. There will only be 21 million Bitcoins that will ever exist in the world, period, full stop. So that provides a very significant characteristic, which is it is a limited supply asset. In addition to that, in the code as well, every 4 years, the amount of those 21 million Bitcoins that are slowly and consistently introduced to the system is halved. So you have a shortage of inflow every 4 years. In 2009, every time that a block was created, the reward were 50 Bitcoins. In 2013, that number was halved to 25. And in 2017, that number was halved to 12.5. And now, just this past May of 2020, that number was halved again to 6.25. So with that being said, it continues to deflate in terms of how many come to market, and that has that very interesting property. The last Bitcoin, given this process, so on and so forth, will come to market beyond in over 100 years. So I don't think any of us will be here by the time the last Bitcoin is mined. So it's a very, very powerful characteristic that needs to be taken into account when we think about Bitcoin. So it's a scarce asset. It's decentralized. This is also an important paradigm shift. So if we look at Bitcoin, there isn't a company or a 1-800 Bitcoin number, an entity that you can speak to that controls Bitcoin. Bitcoin is decentralized. The entire ecosystem that uses Bitcoin, the global miners that validate the transactions and are rewarded in Bitcoin, they are decentralized. So that brings, again, another very interesting characteristic, which is no one entity can control, manipulate, or change to whatever it thinks will make sense the properties of Bitcoin. So it's very clear, transparent how Bitcoin will operate. So this decentralized aspect is also very intriguing. It's public. So when we think about the information of how Bitcoin transacts, I think this is another important piece of information which sometimes is misconceived in the market. The ledger that sits on the blockchain that we talked about in the case of Bitcoin is public. Anybody can access and see the movements of how many Bitcoins were in one wallet and were sent to the other wallet, and so on and so forth. You can track the entire movement and life of any given Bitcoin or any fraction of a Bitcoin. So it is transparent. What, of course, you need to know is who is behind those transactions. And that involves, of course, KYC, AML, and other aspects. But looking at the blockchain, the life, the journey of every given transaction, that is public and stored on the blockchain. So everybody can access. It's a transparent network. Given the properties that we discussed about proof of work, miners, decentralized, the need, if you change if you try to change one historic piece of information and manipulate the blockchain, you will have to do that for the entire history of all the blocks created in the last 12 years of Bitcoin. It makes it extremely resilient to manipulation or fraud. And really, if you think that a block is added every 10 minutes to the Bitcoin blockchain, approximately every 10 minutes, imagine how many blocks are out there already. And I think an important piece of information here to kind of bring it into perspective and validate the power of this technology and efficiency of this technology through the Bitcoin network. So just pure Bitcoin exchange of value, if we look at how much Bitcoin is worth, Bitcoin has transacted and validated over $10 trillion in value since its inception without a single miscalculated or fraudulent transaction. So that is unprecedented. And again, only possible because of the blockchain technology. And it's a growing network. So who really powers the network? The users, the buyers, the sellers, the miners, the custodians, and everybody that is involved. Today, you have well over 100 million people that use Bitcoin in in a way, shape, or form. So, and that number is growing by the day, of course. So this is Bitcoin in a nutshell, right? But when we think about that, okay, wonderful. How has the world reacted to Bitcoin so far, right? And what has been the response? If I had bought, I think this is an interesting data to consider, the power of the appreciation of Bitcoin against the dollar, for example. Back in 2010, if I had invested $100 in Bitcoin at that time, Bitcoin cost about 39 cents. So I could have bought 256 Bitcoins approximately. If I had done that and held on to those Bitcoins until today, those same 256 Bitcoins would be worth approximately $15 million. So it is hands down the best performing asset of the last decade. No doubt about it. and it continues to outperform. So a decade in some cases is a short period of time, but it also is already an interesting amount of track record to consider. So, and this is, I think, an interesting quote by the co-founder of PayPal, which is now also involved in Bitcoin, alluding a little bit to also what we saw before, the power that this monetary capability can bring. I also like to think of Bitcoin, another analogy is nowadays we can use our phones to transfer pretty much any kind of information. If I want to take a picture here right now, I could take a picture, I could send it to somebody through WhatsApp or whatever other kind of instant form. I can send a text, I can send information without an intermediary, without a peer, but I can't send value. I can't send monetary value until Bitcoin and other forms of cryptocurrencies. Now I can send value without depending on an intermediary, and I can do so at my own time, at my own leisure, 24/7. That's another characteristic. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies don't close. It's 24/7, open to the market. As long as you want to engage with another person, you can do so. So continuous adoption taking place. I think if we looked at this chart maybe 12 months ago, it would be very different, and probably many of the names here would not be here. So a lot of interest, a lot of adoption. I think we are in the early stages of what Bitcoin and this global transformation of cryptocurrencies can really mean. So here are some of the names of the global companies that are involved already in crypto. So take Tesla, for example. Tesla invested earlier this year $1.5 billion of its balance sheet cash reserves into Bitcoin. It bought Bitcoin and it's holding Bitcoin. Earlier this week, it also announced that now it's offering its customers the option for them to buy Teslas with Bitcoin. And furthermore, they are not going to convert those Bitcoins that they receive for those cars back to fiat. They're going to keep them in Bitcoin. So very, very powerful statement when you see a corporation such as Tesla, very obviously forward-thinking, technologically innovative company, making this kind of move. You look at payment institutions. So the likes of PayPal now offering the ability for its 300+ million users as of this year to buy Bitcoin in PayPal. So that opens up yet another entirety of potential buyers that can now access Bitcoin through PayPal. Visa, MasterCard have all announced that they're exploring solutions that involve payment capabilities with cryptocurrencies with Bitcoin. MicroStrategy has invested its entire balance sheet. It's a technology company that has invested all of its capital into Bitcoin. So it probably sits on the other extreme of how bullish they are. They actually raised debt in this market landscape at very cheap money, quote unquote, as they said, to buy more Bitcoin and therefore position themselves for what they believe will be a transformative asset. You have JP Morgan, who is now offering custody solutions and banking solutions for the largest exchanges in the United States. And they're also playing with their own JP Morgan coin, which will be a stable coin. You have BlackRock and Guggenheim investment shops and ARK Investments, who have all said that they are looking at Bitcoin or invested in Bitcoin for their respective funds. You have MassMutual, a major insurance company, who has invested over 100 million in Bitcoin for its portfolio. And you have even what I thought was interesting and very opportune, the city of Miami, the mayor of Miami is extremely bullish on Bitcoin. And they are looking at actually also allocating potentially part of the city's treasuries into Bitcoin. And the mayor is also exploring how they may be able to pay their employees with Bitcoin, obviously if the employees desire to be paid in Bitcoin. So a lot of transformation. This is taking place right in front of our eyes. This market is really, the infrastructure is is evolving by the day. It's very exciting to be part of it. And this is a huge testament, right? So these are some of the examples. I mean, again, you have Fidelity, BNY Mellon. Everybody is now looking at this space with a lot of thought and carefulness and focus to see how they may be able to participate. Fidelity actually, in addition to offering custody solutions, so if you own Bitcoin and you want them to hold the Bitcoin for you, they will do that. They have just this week also applied with the Securities and Exchange Commission for an ETF, so an exchange traded fund, which will allow investors to invest in the ETF, and it's pegged basically to Bitcoin. Another major evolution here for the North American market. Those ETFs already exist in Europe, in Canada, and other regions of the world, including Brazil, recently launched as well. But in the US, it's still to come. That'll be another opportunity. So major adoption from retail to large institution to corporations and even governments looking at this. So very exciting time. I would say one of the most, if not the most exciting times to be involved in the digital asset space. And it's very challenging to try to put Bitcoin in a box of what it is. But one of the narratives, which I thought was interesting to share, which seems to be one that is gaining a lot of momentum, is Bitcoin as a store of value. Given the properties we just discussed, it's a very interesting and powerful store of value. And why? If we compare it to gold, for example, right? These are some of the characteristics that make gold a store of value. People look to gold when they want to preserve, when they want to hedge against inflation. And why? Because again, it presents some of these key properties, right? It's a scarce asset. So you can't, it's fairly hard to find. You have to mine gold, and there's a lot of effort and resource put into that. Quite literally the same thing is done in Bitcoin, but it's only with computing power. Gold is even more scarce than, Bitcoin is even more scarce than gold, because it's limited to 21 million. Gold, you may be able to improve technology and mine more gold. It's counterfeit resistant. Again, there has never been a fraudulent transaction detected in the Bitcoin network. So extremely resilient to fraud. Portability, low on gold, right? When we think about, again, some of these characteristics, carrying bars of gold, maneuvering physical storage. When you think about Bitcoin, it's stored in the cloud, it's stored in the internet. So it's very portable. It's also divisible. So when you think about Bitcoin, I think this is also an important point to highlight. Bitcoin currently trades at a little over $50,000. So one may think, well, geez, I need to invest $50,000 if I want to participate in Bitcoin. Well, not necessarily, because Bitcoin is divisible up to 8 decimal houses. So you can actually buy a fraction of a Bitcoin. You can invest a few dollars if you want and own Bitcoin. So that is another interesting characteristics, which I think is important to highlight. Whereas again, gold, not as easy to divide, to buy gold in fractions and so forth. So, and the list goes on here, right? And so with that said, I thought another important aspect here, of course, Tyler Winklevoss, the Winklevoss twins, very much involved in, of course, the launch of Facebook. And they are very, very bullish on the crypto space overall. This is their thesis. They're certainly not alone. They believe that Bitcoin can be gold 2.0. And if Bitcoin is gold 2.0, then look at the market cap of gold. How much is gold worth? Gold trades in total market cap around $9 trillion. So Bitcoin just surpassed earlier this year, and it's actually flirting with up and down the $1 trillion market cap size. So it still has a long runway to go if you assume that it needs to go from 1 trillion, which is currently where it is at about $50,000, $55,000, to 9 trillion, ninefold, 10x from here. So again, early stages of a very, very transformative run in the Bitcoin market. And now shifting gears a little bit, I thought it would be important to also talk about what, cryptocurrencies as well, right? So, I mean, when we think about Bitcoin, Bitcoin is one, it is the largest, the most relevant cryptocurrency out there, but it falls under the umbrella of being a cryptocurrency, if you will. So Bitcoin is about 2/3 of the total market cap of all cryptos out there. So by far, it is the largest, the most dominant, the most relevant cryptocurrency that exists. It is unique in the properties that it has, especially the defined supply, the decentralized characteristic of it, and obviously it has its first mover advantage as well. But then you also have other types of cryptocurrencies like Ethereum, which Ethereum is the second largest cryptocurrency. Bitcoin is, again, worth about $1 trillion. Ethereum is roughly 160 to 200 million. So it's the second largest crypto out there, if you think about the technology and properties that it offers as well. So the way to think about Ethereum, if Bitcoin is gold, then Ethereum, some say, could be analogous to petroleum or oil. Why? Because Ethereum takes that smart contract capability that I described. So what it does is the founders of Ethereum, on the other hand, has a founder, has a company, right? That founded, that created. There are people that actually speak and make decisions around Ethereum. So again, another subtle difference. But in essence, Ethereum is a program within the blockchain. So when you think about that first bubble, again, data and a collection of records, Ethereum is code. It's programmed code inside the blockchain that has rules and actions that take place alone in decentralized ways. So if this happens, then that happens. And so it is a decentralized in the sense of its day-to-day actions. Once it's programmed and once it's operational, the code will manage itself. So this brings up a whole new plethora of DeFi. And what is DeFi? Decentralized banking, decentralized lending, decentralized borrowing. And so there is insurance. There is a lot of potential here, but all powered by the Ethereum network. So very relevant, different propositions, as you can see, but also very powerful, very relevant. I would say it's the second most relevant, most notorious cryptocurrency as we sit here today. You also have stable coins. So these are, as the name suggests, they're stable in nature. So in other words, they are pegged to the dollar. If you have one Tether or one USDC or one PAX, you can exchange that be it an exchange, be it a liquidity provider, you can exchange that for basically $1. What does that mean? That means you have stability. But this is also very interesting from a payment solution standpoint. And for those that may be looking to use the benefits of crypto without the volatility that is embedded in Bitcoin, for example. And then you have other types of cryptocurrencies that, again, are out there. Various types of applications. I think that the two that I would highlight here are Cardano and Polkadot. These are similar in principle to what Ethereum is. They are actually created by former owners and founders of the Ethereum network who spun off and created their own type of blockchain technology. And so they have, of course, different characteristics than Ethereum, but they offer the same essence, right, of smart contract capability, of building programmable software and systems in the blockchain. So these are other two notorious type of decentralized blockchains as well. So as you can see, again, this is really, there are hundreds and hundreds of cryptocurrencies out there. I would certainly, do my homework as a suggestion in terms of if you're looking to get into crypto, definitely starting with Bitcoin and evolving your way from there. Because this is very much an evolving, a dynamic, a volatile space, and still, changing by the day. So finally, kind of that's to kick off, and give an overview. Then, before we go into questions, I just wanted to talk about OWS a little bit, right? So the company that I'm with. So OWS is really founded. It was created. We envisioned the company to really fuel access, global access to digital assets and blockchain technology. So this is still, again, an emerging market, an emerging space. And the more people out there helping those with interest get access, the better. That's our vision. That's what we're trying to do. That's why I'm here today with you talking about Bitcoin, talking about blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. In essence, our business model is we are a proprietary desk. We're a proprietary shop. What that means is we're privately held. We only invest our own capital, and we don't manage funds for third parties or individuals, but we trade. We trade cryptocurrencies, and we offer market making solutions to exchanges, and we buy and sell those cryptocurrencies with vetted counterparties that we deal with. And we also do so with multitude of fiat pairs. So, I think it's opportune, obviously, here with the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce of Florida. So, of course, there's a Brazil angle as well. And we do offer the option to buy and sell crypto in Brazilian reais, as well as in dollars, as well as in euros or pounds. So we can make markets, if you will, and trade in all those different fiat pairs. And that's what we do. So if there's anybody obviously interested in learning more or making a position or investing in the space, we are certainly one of the shops that can assist with something like that. And with that said, those were the remarks that I had prepared here, and I will pause here. I'm happy to take questions and look forward to continuing the conversation.
Thank you, Luciano. It was a very enlightening presentation. I'm sure people now know a little bit more than they did 35 minutes ago. And we have a few questions here from some of our participants. And I'm going to see how many of them we can do. So one of the questions is, any currency has a reserve behind it or a full country or business behind it? What is behind Bitcoin? How does it gain or lose value?
So that's a great question, and it is a bit of a paradigm shift, right? So Bitcoin, what is behind Bitcoin is the user base, the 100+ million people that use Bitcoin and that believe it has value, right? So if you look at again, currencies or gold, they have value because people understand they have value. Bitcoin is very similar. There isn't one entity behind Bitcoin that dictates that it has value. It's the user base. People that buy Bitcoin understand that it has value because of its scarcity properties, or for whatever reason. And they also believe that they will, of course, be able to sell that Bitcoin if needed and if they desire to do so. So what provides value for Bitcoin is precisely its user base. And if we apply Metcalfe's law to that, the growth of the network, the more valuable something is. And if we look at how the network of Bitcoin is evolving every single day, I mean, something, just a side note, for example, you look at emerging markets and the phenomenon that Bitcoin has in those markets. So where you have unstable currencies or significant inflation, right? We can think of some of those markets in Latin America or Asia or Africa. Bitcoin has become a very attractive asset in those markets. People are literally paying significant premiums on their current local currencies to buy Bitcoin. Why? Because they know that Bitcoin will hold value versus a significant inflation scenario, a hyperinflation scenario. So that's just one use case that makes Bitcoin have value. But ultimately, it's the user network, the entire ecosystem, if you will.
A second question here is, how can we be sure that Bitcoin will maintain its position as market leader and won't be overtaken by a new form of crypto?
So that's also very interesting. I mean, I think that first of all, no one really knows, right? I think it's fair to put that out there, right? I mean, this is an ever evolving market, but my view on that is Bitcoin has very unique properties that make it so desirable, and I think among them you have the characteristic of, again, being decentralized. There isn't the fear, if you will, really of, again, a controlling entity that tomorrow may want to change the way Bitcoin works, and for the good or the bad of some. So the decentralized characteristic, the limited supply characteristic, there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoins. And of course, the fact that it has been the most tested, right, out there, the most tested crypto for the last 12 years, and it has a very clear first mover advantage. I guess the question would be, why would someone that is looking to invest, for example, in digital assets as a store of value, forego that kind of characteristic and those properties for something new, right? What would really be the additional element? So I think it's very unlikely to happen. But again, obviously, no one really knows for sure, right? But if you look at the market as it's behaved, certainly till now, and all the indications, all those major players that I described, they're getting into Bitcoin. They're getting into Bitcoin, right? Notice there's also, for those who follow, you look at Elon Musk, for example, right? Just to take an example and speak a little bit to that. So, he's flirted with tweets on Dogecoin, which is a meme coin, right? And the price moves severely up and down, lots of volatility.
Yes.
But when you think about business, he didn't offer Tesla, the folks the ability to buy Teslas with Dogecoin. He didn't buy Dogecoin with his capital and his balance sheet. They did it with Bitcoin. Same thing, for all these other aspects, right? So Bitcoin is very, very clearly the first mover, and I think that the chances of someone catching it, given its unique properties as well, are very, very, very slim.
You obviously spoke about it being a safe transaction. Now, how legally dependable is Bitcoin and crypto transactions in general?
Great point. Great point. So I think there is this brings us also to a regulatory conversation as well, right? So, you look at the landscape, there is more and more regulatory framework happening, right? So over the last few months, the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency in the United States, started to allow banks, charter banks, federally chartered banks, to custody crypto, to also participate in the validation, act almost quote unquote as a miner in those crypto transactions. And of course, you have context around how, more regulatory framework coming to the market. You also have, in Brazil, for example, the country has been very forward looking as well in terms of regulation. So, the Brazilian Receita Federal, or the IRS equivalent, has also given guidelines on how to report, and how crypto should be taxed and so forth. So you have an evolving regulatory landscape. Crypto is legal, so anybody can buy or sell crypto. There's obviously a lot of KYC, know your customer, and anti-money laundering policies that go around that, for various companies that transact. But it is a legal activity. Now, something important to note, I think very important to note, is when you do execute a transaction in crypto, in Bitcoin, for example, that transaction, again, part of the property is immutable. It is done. So that is why it's very important to have good technological understanding and processes of operating in the space. So by that, I mean, in the legality, it is legal, but your recourse will be to your peer that you're dealing, right? There isn't a third party independent intermediary that you can go to. So if I'm transacting a Bitcoin with you, if I send you that Bitcoin, it is done, right? It is out of my control. You have it. I can't take it back. If for some reason I need to get it back, I need to call you and ask you to send it to me, but it's gone as far as, and that would be another transaction on the blockchain, right? So very much legal, one can operate. There's guidelines around how to do so that, is evolving as governments get their arms more and more around it, but be mindful of, again, how to operate in the space.
Excellent. And as a follow-up to this is also, what kind of protections should somebody that is trying to get into crypto now, what kind of a mindset should they have as in order not to lose their crypto?
Great point. I mean, I think and that actually brings to another fact, right, that I think is worth mentioning. So we talked about there are only 21 million Bitcoins that are ever going to exist, right? Of those 21 million, about 18 million have already been mined. So they are in the system, if you will. They are transacting, they are available and exist in the network. The remaining 3 will be mined for the next 100+ years in the halving dynamic and the block rewards that we discussed. But of those 18 that were mined, about 3 million have been lost, and they are gone forever. Because again, why? If you lose your password or your keys to wherever you store your Bitcoin, then they're gone, they're lost, right? So they're back to the concept again of the importance of technology and being mindful, right? So of course, there are very, very practical ways around that, right? I mean, and obviously you just need to know what you're doing in terms of getting the right assistant, the assistant studying the right, types of information and how to maneuver, but definitely be mindful of where you're going to buy from, right? So obviously I think reputation, remember again, the transactions that we talked about, knowing who you're dealing with on the other side, right? And being a trusted entity or person, whoever may be the case that you're buying or selling from. And then also thinking about custody. So how are you going to custody those coins? Are you going to self-custody, right? And if so, are you going to hold those coins in a hot storage, which means that ultimately those coins are linked to the internet at some point? Or are you going to do a cold storage, which ultimately means that they're not in the internet. They're literally cold stored in a ledger, in some other kind of technological tool that will only, they're going to be sitting outside of the internet world, so to speak, from a hacking connectivity standpoint, right? So these are all technical aspects, right? But that definitely should be considered if you're looking to invest in crypto, if you're looking to buy, to hold and maneuver. And there are obviously, companies such as ourselves that can help with trading, with accessing, and there are many others that can help with custody as well. So the ecosystem very much exists, but these are some important characteristics to think about.
Can you just quickly explain mining? Some of our people here would like to understand what mining is, and maybe use an analogy so they could understand it.
Absolutely. So mining, basically, think of mining as computer power in the sense of Bitcoin. Okay, so imagine that you have those hundreds of millions of people, or 100+ million people using and transacting Bitcoin. Every second, there are several transactions taking place. So I sent you, Zaki, a Bitcoin right now. That needs to be accounted in the ledger, right? Somebody needs to look at that transaction and validate that transaction. Indeed, Luciano sent, or this wallet sent Zak's wallet a Bitcoin, right? That's one in several transactions taking place. Miners will use computing power to monitor those transactions and validate those transactions. So they have computers that are literally turning and working in this blockchain to validate all of the different transactions through, again, you're allocating energy and computing power to do so. But there is a kicker, right? Which in mining, one would say, okay, well, what is to stop a miner from hacking the blockchain, right? And going back and manipulating, well, I didn't really send, let me go ahead and revert that transaction, right? Well, in order to do that, they also need to solve for a complex mathematical equation, which is the proof of work concept. So while miners are validating the transactions that have taken place, their computers are at the same time working to solve extremely complex mathematical equations. And in doing so, they are rewarded, right? So mining is literally this integrity of the blockchain, right? And you have a lot of companies that this is their business. Mining is a business that is now worth a market of over $16 billion annually. Because if you think about the value of a Bitcoin, the fact that in every block, miners get rewarded with Bitcoin, they can turn around and sell those Bitcoins. Today, this is a $15+ billion market. And so with that in mind, people are investing in computing power and technology to bring the integrity to that, to that blockchain. That's kind of mining in a nutshell.
Excellent. Have another question here. What is your opinion about the compliance issues surrounding Bitcoin and crypto in general?
Absolutely. So huge topic, very relevant for anybody who operates in the space. Compliance is probably the most spoken word in the day-to-day. A lot of governance around it, right? I mean, if you think about, the fact that, companies such as ourselves, we're dealing with fiat, we're dealing with cash, we're interacting with counterparties, and cash, I mean wire, not physical cash, right? We don't deal in physical cash, but you're dealing with monies, fiat currencies, and you're receiving funds, you're sending funds, and you're receiving crypto and you're sending crypto. Well, it's very important to know who you're dealing with, right? And to have a KYC and AML policy around that. So that is number one, right? I mean, and that governance flows down the chain. I mean, if you want to have a bank relationship and do any kind of serious activity, you have to have a solid compliance program in place that is continuously being monitored and executed, or else you're not going to have that that kind of infrastructure. And so that trickles down through the ecosystem and through the business. And another important thing that I think is worth mentioning in crypto, remember that we talked about it is a public ledger. So every transaction is public, and you have companies that all they do is specialize in forensic work to follow illegal, illicit activities. And they've worked with the FBI, they've worked with CIA and IRS, and we actually have seen over the last few years, some cases being solved with the power of the blockchain. So actually, Bitcoin is much more traceable than cash. If you think about cash, I can give you $1 and it can move around. I'll never know where it came from, the history or whatnot. But in Bitcoin, I will know every single movement of that Bitcoin since its origination. I will see it went from this wallet to this wallet to that wallet. And oh, by the way, this wallet in my forensic work, again, a company specializing in this wallet has been flagged and it as an illicit wallet. Something is wrong here. And they will track that entirety until ultimately, at some point, the perpetrator is trying to get out into cash. and they'll eventually find where that last path is. So actually, Bitcoin is extremely, and blockchain are extremely transparent and traceable, and the industry is very much compliant. There's another study that came out earlier this year that shows that less than 0.3% of the transactions in Bitcoin are illicit transactions. Everything else is normal transaction, people buying, people selling, and normal, legitimate, above board transactions.
All right, we're running out of time, but I'm gonna have 2 more questions, and the rest you can certainly respond in writing to the people that are asking. So what is the likelihood that Bitcoin or its blockchain could be hacked or shut down?
Very good question. So before I answer that, I just want to take the opportunity to take a parenthesis here. So you have my email on the screen there. So anybody who wants to reach out and get in touch with me to follow up with any questions that may have not been answered, please do so. It's L for Luciano, and then my last name Freud's, and the rest there. So that said, what is the risk of the Bitcoin blockchain being shut down? Well, since it is such a decentralized ecosystem, there is no single point of failure. I mean, really, the extreme scenario would be, what if the internet of the world shut down? So in other words, think of a scenario where, hypothetically, the entire world stopped functioning from a internet standpoint, and all the data was lost, right? That would be kind of a theoretical scenario, because other than that, keep in mind again that the blockchain for Bitcoin is a public ledger that all the miners have access to and agree on consensus. So there isn't a single point of failure that can shut down Bitcoin. And mining, again, we could join forces here now and say, you know what, let's start mining Bitcoin. And we could start mining. And there are hundreds of companies that, as again, the ecosystem grows, are getting into mining. And so with that, I think it's almost hypothetical. And that's the hypothetical scenario that I can think of where the Bitcoin blockchain would be shut down.
Excellent. Just before I revert to Claudio for closing remarks, what is your opinion as to Bitcoin's price at this moment? Is it cheap? Is it expensive? Just be very objective and quick as we're running out of time here.
Sure. Well, I think, I guess I would summarize by saying you got to have stomach for weathering the volatility. So I think we can certainly, see swings here that are 20%, 15, 30%. So be ready for those. But I am extremely constructive and bullish on the long run. I mean, if you're looking to invest for the long run for the concept, I'm more of the camp, and this of course is just me personally speaking, I'm more of that camp that Bitcoin can be gold 2.0. And if it is, then we have a long way to go in seeing 6-digit Bitcoins here. So with that mindset, long run thinking, I think it's cheap.
Excellent. So Luciano, if there is anything else you would like to add, it's now, and after that, we'll revert to Claudio for closing remarks.
Thank you. No, I mean, I think, thanks again for the time, for the opportunity. I really enjoyed chatting with all of you. Happy to, again, connect with anybody who wants to reach out, and available to help, those access the crypto space that may want to. So thanks again.
Thank you. Claudio.
Thank you, Luciano. Yes, thank you, George. Thank you, Luciano. Great presentation. I'm already receiving tons of texts here from our members. So really appreciating this presentation. George, Zach, really appreciate the moderation. Great questions. I think you put into perspective what are in the minds of our members. There's a lot more, but we need to stop here. Really appreciate again. Thank you. Happy Friday to everyone. Keep in touch, and we hopefully will have more events like this with Luciano and probably Zach involved. Thank you again.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Claudio.
everybody.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
weekend. Bye-bye.